All right, welcome aboard. So this is round two of me talking about round two. The first video I recorded, the audio was terrible, so I'm back. Going to do another recording here, and hopefully, the audio is a lot better. I'm confident that it is. I've, tested a couple of things, a couple of kind of switcheroos on the setup here on the good old rig I've got going. So yeah, let's get right into it. So, a couple days ago, I did my own little bracket prediction. No gambling involved, just some good old fun. Picking out a couple of teams. Or a few teams, kind of see how they do in the first round. I've got my thoughts and opinions on who I think is going to do well and who I think is probably going to go home early. So this is probably one of those tough ones. I mean, if you don't live near the area, this is probably one of those tough tournaments to make a decision on if you want to hit it or not. Because basically it can be just whatever. It's not even full games because they're Baker games. So you throw a few shots and you're out of the tournament. It's a tough gig. So I don't envy the guys. The position that they're in. They got to bowl as much as they can, and there's not really a lot of opportunity for making money out there. So I feel for the guys, and especially an event like this where you can go home pretty early. So the people that you have to beat to stay in the tournament are the best in the world, and you know they're going to do everything they can so they don't have to go home early. So let's get into it. So I brought up on here is my first my thoughts on the round one. We'll just kind of get into this here. So I'm thinking, I put this in here. I think, I thought that, EJ and, Kent could take care of this particular pick, this number 32 pick. If I read the description correctly, this is what they call a host pick. So basically, I guess the bowling center that's hosting the event, they picked a couple of guys and they seeded them in. So because I've never heard of these guys, and so the way the website described it is that this was a host pick. So they're going home early, and hopefully they live nearby the bowling center because that's it's a tough trip, for one day. So, anyways, moving on. I thought that. Oh wait, here. Let me get this highlighted here. These guys won. Okay. And the next one here is, I thought, I thought Matt Russo and, Nick Pate would do better. They seem to be doing pretty well. However, they lost, to Keiko and Roberts. So we got to cross these guys out here. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color here. Okay, and oh, that's a little bit much here. It's all right. I should have. That's not what I wanted here. That's not what I wanted. Sorry. We'll get through this here. All right. So Team 17, Russo and Pate, you're going home early. So who do we got? So we've got 16. Go up a little bit here in font. All right. So next, so it's another one I lost. I thought that Anderson and Prather, previous champions of this event, I thought they would do pretty well. And let's see what they were. Yeah, Yeah, they went home 4-2. Looks like they only had one big game and a few middling games there, just not going to cut it. So they're going home early. And I'm going to write in here. This team is 24. Moving right along here. I thought this was a pretty easy pick. I just didn't see any scenario where Crow and Stiller were going to take out Eddie and Dio. I just didn't see it. It's just it wasn't going to happen. If it was one game, yeah, it's a pick 'em. But over 7 games, it's a pretty easy call. They did take him 4-3. They did take him to the limit. Looks like that last game, 209, 237. So 3 marks. They took him to the wall, and I got to say, it looks like they bowled pretty well. All 4 of them being lefty, but it's Baker doubles, so it's one player, one lane. So maybe one could play off the other, or one can shim them for the other. Who knows? Who knows what happens? I don't subscribe to Bowl TV, so maybe next season, I'll think about it, because now it seems like on Bowl TV they're doing some commentating, which makes a huge difference. I don't want to just watch Bowlers Bowl, without any commentary. That's not any fun. So, all right. So moving on here. So we got Bonta and TJ up against Nate Garcia and Julian Salinas. And that one I predicted correctly. So these guys are sticking around. Ogle and Brash. This one seemed to go, this one went 4-3. They took them to the end. It was just a couple of marks difference there in the last game. So who knows how that transpired, but they took them all the way. So one is my prediction went here, and then Upe and Packy up against what was that? AJ and TJ. So let's kind of go through. Where's this at? Yeah, the order here is kind of odd because they didn't follow their, this printed out bracket. They had some other thing going on. So here, I took them all the way to the wall, and look at that. That was less than a mark. That's 2 strong teams, and just like you would imagine, that's an 8-pin difference on the last game, the deciding game. Even the previous game was 9 pins. So it looks like they had some, 300 to 269. That's tough. 247, 256. Yeah, these guys. Shooting 770 or 780 and only having one game to show for it. That's a tough first 3. But anyways, that one ended up the way I thought it would. So, and this one I missed on. This Lavery Spar, brothers. I assume they're brothers. Maybe they're cousins. I really don't know. I've seen the name, here and there, but I really don't know. But I was picking Grandpa Bill O'Neill. Bill O'Neill's a past winner, and Graham seemed to have, have some momentum behind him. But that didn't work out. So they're going home early. So right in the new team number here is 28. All right, so let's go over here. So I thought this was pretty easy to pick here with Boog and Kevin. And then Santu and Ethan, I really thought that, Darren Tang and Chris Vi have been bowling pretty well lately. And, Ethan this year seems to be a little bit off. Last year he had a breakout year, or I think that was his rookie year. So I don't know. You call it a breakout year or just a great rookie year or whatever. But Santu, finished second to Simo, at 290, 279 games. So I felt Santu, had some pretty good confidence, but I still was leaning towards, Chris By, Darren Tang, and that didn't work out. So they get to go back home a little early. But maybe they'll get ready for I think what's next for them. Like they have one regular event, and then they have the World Series coming up. So, they're going to want to rest up a little bit for that. So maybe the doubles, yeah, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal. Allows them to rest up, and maybe I'm sure they'll do well in the next, few weeks here. Put that in. So here we go. Ryan Barnes, Chris Barnes, and we all know the story for that. Ryan's bowling great, and he's, just on the verge of just, being a complete animal on tour. I think that he's going to be spoken like EJ is and Velmo. I think it's just a matter of time. You got to get there, and that's what Ryan's doing. He's getting there, and he's going to be something special. It'll be something fun to watch. And there's another kid out here in Southern California that's got the touch of the old man, the old man professional bowler that's getting some good guidance, and we'll see in the next 3, 4, 5 years some kid out of SoCal. I'm looking forward to when he comes out, or when he gets out on tour, because there's going to be a couple of proud papas over there, between Barnes and who's coming from SoCal. Anyways, to me, I thought this was a pretty easy pick, but anyways, this one, yeah, I mean, this, I really don't know the other guys too well, so to me, this was kind of a no-brainer pick. I wouldn't call it an easy pick because I didn't really know the other guys. It was more of a no-brainer pick. Simo and Dom, yeah, they didn't do too well. They took it all the way to the end, and they lost by a good handful here. Who knows what happened? It might have been over, after 7 or 8 frames. Who knows? Whoever was watching would know. But anyways, so Simo and Dom are going home early. But watch out for Simo when it comes to the World Series. He's going to turn into an animal, and he's going to be a problem for a lot of guys. So we'll write in the new team there. Oops. Let's leave that there. There. Let me correct that. This one was a little bit of a sentimental pick. I think that Spencer Robar is going to be one of those guys that's going to be a handful over the next 5 to 10 years. I think that he's going to emerge most likely as the best lefty on tour. I just see that is happening. I don't know what Packy needs to change. I really don't know the two-handed game that well. It just feels like there's something there that Packy needs to make some adjustments on. I don't think it's confidence. I don't think it's ignorance. I think he knows the equipment well. He knows the patterns very well. He's a very knowledgeable player. But as far as, again, kind of going back to future lefties, I think Spencer has a pretty good grip on the game, and making 2 shows, winning one of them. But yeah, in that 10th frame would have been nice for him to punch out. I don't remember punching out when he won, in that 10th frame in the left lane. If I don't remember the scoring, but I knew I think he could have punched out and would have locked Ryan out. Would have been nice, if Spencer did figure that out. I think the next time we see him on the show and he's in a similar position, I think that he'll execute better. I just think that he's got lane presence, and he's got confidence, and he has a really good idea of what his equipment's doing. So I think over the next 3, 4, 5 years, Spencer's going to emerge as the top lefty on tour. But with that said, he's going home early. So, Yeah, they lost, looks like pretty handily. I mean, it looks like they had a 279 first game, little probably a single frame roll off. So they lost pretty handily, 4-2. You know, it just you're bowling against the best, and that's just what happens. So I was wrong on that one. So here we go. Here, this one I was going back and forth with. Butters can turn into a strike machine like no other, and I really don't know much about Knowles. Like I don't even know his first name. Is it Justin Knowles? Is it Jacob Knowles? Anyways, um, but initially I was leaning towards Butters, just because I felt that Kevin and Foy, McCune and Foy, I just didn't think that they had much in common to kind of play off of each other. But that was when I was thinking about this match. That was before I knew that they were Baker. Well, I thought that maybe it was Baker, but I didn't realize that it would be pick your lane and you stay on that lane. I think they did this in previous years, and obviously I wasn't paying attention that close, so um, I was going back and forth. I did, I did pick this one right, so at least I think I did. I don't know. I'd have to go back and check some other stuff, but I had it I had it written down, so it must have been right. It was on the internet. And here we've got Kyle Sherman and Brad Miller up against Dombrowski and Maverick. The Bailey Maverick, yeah, I haven't really seen him around. Didn't really know. I mean, PD's, he's experienced. You know, he's a proven winner. Um, as far as where Brad and Kyle are at, as far as their games, you know, um, Kyle's pretty strong, and I felt that the past couple of weeks his game has really gotten. He's got. I mean, again, it's my opinion. I think that he really got. Um, I don't know how to say it, but I think that Kyle's game over the past couple of weeks has really gotten tighter. I thought that the first few weeks he was pretty loose in. I thought he was pretty loose in his push away, and it would cause an over the top situation. And if you look at some of the older videos that they would show, it just looked like he was getting out of. He was walking away from. It wasn't that he was walking away from his swing. It was just that his swing wasn't very tight. And again, this is my opinion, and you can tell me I'm full of shit until the cows come home. I don't really care, but the past couple of weeks when they were showing the videos, it looked like he got his game, just another touch finer, just a little bit finer, and I think that's made a difference. And I think that's why the past couple of weeks he's been in play, and um, hopefully he continues that. I didn't watch any of the footage from from their videos or other videos or Bull TV. I haven't watched it, but I did watch some stuff from last week, and it looks like Kyle's figuring it out. And so hopefully he has a strong tournament this week, and then hopefully he takes that into the next few weeks here, and finds his way to the to a title. So a little bit of this was you know it was probably about a 60% sentimental, 40%. I think that Kyle's bowling pretty well, and I think it's just extra incentive for Brad to bowl well. I'm not too sure where Brad is at on his game. Watched, and I don't really have too much of an opinion there. So they won, and now let's go back up to the top and let's see who we think is going to win here. So, or at least my opinions on who I think is going to win. So let me see. So back up to the top, we got EJ up against Keiko and Roberts. And I think that's just going to be a little chalk action there, but let me see here. Yep, you got to do it. You can't go away from EJ. There's no way. You can't. Anyway, you just can't. So let me see here for obviously I was wrong here. So you got Keplinger and Davidson. I really don't know the guys too well. I don't even know if I think Keplinger's left-handed. Davidson's right-hander, like a big right-hander. If I remember correctly, I thought he kind of got on it pretty good, like a one-handed, I think. But I think Eddie and Dio are just bowling way too well. So I think they're going to pull this. So let's go down here. Again, Nate and Julian, they're both bowling really well right now. Julian, he's kind of been steady. He's been kind of there. I think, he's another one of those guys. I think he has really good lane presence, and I really think he understands his own game. It's just, you're going up against the top of, the best bowlers in the world, and he's just kind of getting his sea legs under him. I think, maybe this tournament, I hope to see some kind of breakout here. So they'll all be going against, Ogle and Rash, and, Ogle, he's in his prime, right now, and Rash is kind of, on the tail end of his career. Yeah, he did win, a few months ago. But I'm just going to give this to, Nate and Julian. Yeah, here we go. We got Hoope and Patrick, and there's the brothers. So, and the brothers, I don't know how they're playing. I thought that they, I watched a couple of videos of them, but it was just a couple of clips here and there. So, I couldn't get a real good feel. I think that, I just think that I think it was, I'm trying to remember what my sheet was saying here. Yeah, Hoope and Patrick are just, they've got this one. All right, here we go over. So now we've got Boog and Kevin up against Santu and Ethan. That's going to be tough. I think 3 out of those 4 are bowling well, and one of them, is probably lacking some confidence. I know Kevin's been struggling a little bit. Hopefully he finds it, and hopefully he builds up some confidence. And it's like I don't want to, kick a man while he's struggling. But this is bracket time. I'm not making any money, but I got to go with what I think, and that Santu Ethan team is pretty strong. Pretty strong. I'm gonna, because I filled out my complete bracket, all the way to the end. So, I was trying to keep track of it, and I had Boog and Kevin losing in this round anyway. So, but I did have Chris and Darren beaten Boog and Kevin, but Santu and Ethan are the victors of that bracket. So, moving on. So, all right. This is the problem I have when I'm picking brackets and picking stuff like this. I remember years ago I was in fantasy baseball, and this is years and years. I mean, this is going back a while. Mike Piazza playing for the Dodgers. So, so I got involved in this, fantasy. It was only one season ever that I've ever played fantasy baseball, and it taught me a cruel lesson, about being a homer. I a lot of my team were Dodgers, and at the time, Dodger Stadium was a pitcher's park. It wasn't a hitter's park. That's what made Mike Piazza even more special was that, dude's batting 330, inside a pitcher's park pretty much, So, anyways, fantasy baseball is not for me because I end up going with, people that I'm already rooting for. So this is the reason why I'm telling you that story is, I'm rooting for, the Barnes kid and Pops to, to reel one off. And I've, he's going to show up. I don't know here. Maybe I can show you here. I don't know if it's going to pop up. Yeah, it's this thing's struggling. Yeah, I've got 10. That's Barnes and Barnes to win it all. We'll see. It's a little bit of it's a sentimental pick, but it's not a sentimental pick where it's sentimental out of they don't have talent. It's not that. It's that they have the talent to win it, and they're both bowling well, and I want to see them win it. So that's part of it. Let me see here. So yeah, Jesper's bowling well and Kyle's bowling pretty well. I think it seemed like I haven't really followed too much, as far as exactly what Kyle's been doing. But yeah, I'm going with I told you already. I told you why I'm going with these guys. Going with the Barnes. All right, so these two. These are a mess for me because I missed on both. So, so it's the Simo. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm all out of sorts here. So let me see here. So we got this team. I don't know these guys, Petrin and Horton, up against Wilkins and this is AJ Chapman. I got to go. I got to go with what I know. So, it's Zach and AJ. So put them there. And then now we've got Foy and McCune. And, I thought that they did pretty well. Yeah, they bowled their ass off. I can't go against that. As much as I want Kyle and I'm going against my pick here. Again, that little sentimental thing, I want to see, Brad and Kyle do well. Let's see how Brad and Kyle bowled here. Well, of course, all I have is just they weren't missing. They were not missing it at all. 220, 240. Then they lose 2020. Then they pick it back up 220, 250. All right. Wait, hold on. I got to show you guys. So I hand wrote this out a while back. So I've got them as 27, beating Foy and McCune. So I'm sticking to it. All right. Well, let's take another look at this here. So this is where I'm at. So you guys can see my picks as far as the winners tomorrow. And I was I 5 for 8 and 5 for 8. All right. So 10 out of 16. Some of these were pretty easy picks. Some, a little bit of surprises. I don't know who a dark horse would be in this. If there was to be a dark horse, it's got to be the unknown teams, or not necessarily unknown, but just like this, Petrin and Horton, or the Keplinger, Davidson, Keiko and Roberts. Pick any of those three are kind of your dark horses. Your front runner is going to be EJ. To me, that's a front runner. Yeah. Simo's already out. Oh, yeah, I think the front runner's got to be EJ, and if I was to pick a number 2 front runner, I just think that Ryan's bowling way too well right now. And I know his dad's going to pick it up, and I know there's a couple of videos. His dad was talking about that he's bowling better. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap this one up. So, thanks for watching, and we'll see how they all play out. Hopefully, I'll be right. It's not going to make a difference besides me maybe saying, "I told you so." All right, keep striking.